Hi guys, you're watching Rappler. My name is Bea Copin. I am still in Cebu City and I am still joined by Ryan Macasero, our reporter here based in Cebu. This is a recap for the events of last night. Kung wala mo kakita, if you didn't watch our live yesterday afternoon, we covered the Uniteam festival rally, is what they called it, no? In the SRP sa Cebu City. It is the Uniteam slate's first and so far, possibly the only grand rally they'll have in the vote-rich province of Cebu, not just the city, but Cebu province as a whole. No? So context lang what happened yesterday. So that would be April 18 in the evening. So the rally was hosted by One Cebu, that's the incumbent, the ruling party here in the province, led by Governor Garcia, and also of Tingog party list. So ang kanang Tingog, sorry, I'll switch from Bisaya to English for everyone watching. No? So Tingog party list is currently represented by Yeda Gonzalez Romualdez, the wife of Majority Leader Martin Romualdez, who is also Lakas CMD President and the co-campaign manager of Vice Presidential candidate Sara Duterte, para lang maintindihan mo yung connections ng mga tao. So unless plans change, that would have been the first and the only grand rally of Uniteam in vote-rich Cebu po. Paulit-ulit ko sinasabi yung vote-rich Cebu. Bakit vote-rich Cebu?
Because Cebu has the most number of voters in the country with 3.2 million voters, and is one of the most engaged electorate in the country. Yeah.
So yung One Cebu, again, it's the dominant party in the province, led by the governor. They recently, almost one week ago today, no, they signed not just an endorsement, pero alliance na talaga siya between Uniteam and One Cebu. So, Ryan, kamusta last night? Bukod sa nangyari pagkatapos. Huwag natin pag-usapan muna yung mga nangyari sa atin after.
Yeah. It was very intense and long day, but good thing, before the Uniteam came, it was raining for a week straight. So the crowds really swelled into the evening, and they featured actually a lot of local politicians from the cities of Cebu, Mandaue, and Lapu-Lapu, which you don't really see very much in Cebu City because it oftentimes asserts its status as an independent city. And I think that's one of the biggest things that stood out to me was it was mentioned several times last night that one Cebu means one island. So in terms of governance, for those who don't know, the residents of the independent cities of Cebu and Lapu-Lapu can't vote for governor. And so the governor has no authority over Cebu City, and the residents of Cebu City have no say in who the governor is. But I think there's a conscious effort to really close that gap in the identity of Cebu, that it is just one island, and that the politicians or the local leaders should work together, and especially in times of pandemic. During the first lockdowns, 2020 to 2021, depending where you are in Cebu, there are different rules on capacity, on what times you can go out, if you needed a quarantine pass, so it was confusing. So I think that was probably one of the points where the leaders realized that they really have to align and stop this, asserting.
You do that, I do this. Lahi-lahi ang atong concerns, as if. Kasi if you haven't had the pleasure of visiting Cebu, dikit-dikit yung big cities, right? Like, literally, you're in Cebu, and then next thing you know, you're already in Mandaue City, which is another big city here in the province. So, para lang may understanding kayo why this is such a big deal, or why it stood out for Ryan, for example. Kasi to me, it was normal to see mayors of different cities and municipalities sharing the stage together. But in the context of Cebu, this is rarely seen, no, in the political
And I think it goes along with the theme of unity. One island. That the policy should be aligned, that leaders should work together. And it was, whereas before it was really a hands-off policy that I can't meddle with Mandaue City, and Mandaue can't meddle with Lapu-Lapu, and We're here in City Hall because you had an interview also with Mayor Rama, where he mentioned earlier about why he thought that One Cebu was important. So, can you talk about what your takeaways from that interview was?
Which will air soon on Rappler also. So we had a sit down with the Cebu City Mayor muna namin in front of City Hall. So, again, siguro ang pinaka-big takeaway doon was it was a lot of learnings from the pandemic nga. He had to remind me because sometimes 2020 feels like a lifetime ago, no? Nga murag Cebu was in the spotlight for very wrong reasons, for very unfortunate reasons, no? Because of the way the pandemic unfolded here in the early. I mean, Ryan can expound siguro on that better later, no? Pero murag ang akong impression was that a lot of learnings there was about how borders are basically non-existent in a pandemic. Wala kaila ang virus sa mga city border. Wala siya pakialam kung naka sa Mandawi, naka sa Cebu. So, and I think our viewers in Metro Manila will also relate to this, diba? Parang the early parts of the pandemic was very confusing. Like from one LGU to another, lahi-lahi ang rules, iba-iba yung rules. Minsan nga parang sa iba't ibang checkpoint in one LGU, iba-iba din yung rules depending sa interpretation na nag-i-implement ng checkpoint. So that was something interesting from last night and from the interview this morning na parang politicians see it, or the leaders, the incumbents see it nga as okay, we need to change how we approach interacting with each other and policy building. But from a political standpoint, I see it as, and I'm sure many people will agree with this, no? It's the consolidation of power in a very integral island in not just in the elections but in the Philippines in general, right? Like Queen City of the South and and the province that it belongs to. Of course, the incumbents will tell you this is not just about consolidation of power, but if you observe it for what it is, parang you see na parang beyond siguro fine-tuning policy and refining and preparing not the island as a whole for Simbakulang, another event like the COVID well, it's still ongoing, but like something like the start of the COVID pandemic, preparing for that. But parang more than that, it's really the consolidation of power, which is manifested by their promise to Uniteam now na wala gi-promise or hindi nag-promise si Governor Gwen Garcia ng any specific number, because you usually hear that from politicians, di ba na I promise you X number of votes. But she did say, pero na pa rin siya promise, technically may promise pa rin pala siya. She did say na she expects a win margin. So lamang, she expects a win margin for BBM that's greater than President Duterte's win margin here in Cebu province from 2016. So
yeah, I agree with that assessment. Governor Gwen Garcia, I think is one who is very acute when it comes to political moves.
Yeah.
And what it means is that if the city and the province would align, it would give her greater influence over Cebu City. And her nephew is actually running for vice mayor in this election, Raymond Garcia, whose father is the founder of local newspaper Sunstar. So it might be a stepping stone to another Garcia becoming mayor. The Garcia family is a very young dynasty, very ambitious family with influence that goes from the southern part of the province up to the north, whether they're family or allies of the family. So I think it's important for her to gain a foothold, which has been difficult because of its independence status.
And to cross over also sa Cebu City side naman, again, the full interview will air on Rappler soon. Nabanggit ni Mayor Rama kanina, di ba? He wasn't saying that he had any plans to run for provincial office, but he said na it's not an impossibility. Kumbaga, so parang ano rin siya, no? So yun nga, parang you see a shift in is it a shift? Would it be fair to call it a shift? Or a gradual tweaking in the dynamics of politics here in Cebu province? Which again, I know this sounds very old for those who siguro have been following Rappler coverage, but Cebu, 3.2 million registered voters in 2022. That's a huge chunk. Revisiting lang again yung 2016 numbers, no? The one Cebu, endorsed Duterte and his running mate then, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, in April. You were saying, diba? It was April 2016 na. So medyo late endorsement din siya. Ngayon naman, April din nila in-endorse yung Uniteam slate. They endorsed Sara Duterte from the very beginning. Pero si Bongbong Marcos late na, yung Uniteam late na na-sign yung alliance. So, so in 2016, yung ranking kung baga ng vice presidential race dito was Leni Robredo, Vice President Leni Robredo, won in the entire province, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Except Cebu City. She lost in Cebu City, but I think it was also a fairly narrow margin from Alan Peter Cayetano. So yung ranking dito was Leni Robredo won in Cebu province, and then followed by Alan Peter Cayetano, who had the support of one Cebu, and finally Bongbong Marcos Jr. was a fairly distant third in the vice presidential race. So,
yes, and I think even though a lot of the evening they spent talking about unity,
yeah,
I think it's important to note that the entire province is not necessarily united under one Cebu.
Yeah.
As we mentioned yesterday, Governor Gwen's own brother, Congressman PJ Garcia, is still supporting Isko Moreno. And I want to apologize for a mistake I made on air yesterday. He's actually supporting Davao Mayor Sara Duterte for Vice President.
So isa na
yes.
combination.
And his district has about a total of 329,000 votes, so that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
And of course, the Garcia's main rival for power in the province is the Durano family, who his influence is greatly in. Their influence is mostly in the 5th district in northern Cebu, with Danao City in the center.
Yeah. And for added context, the current representative of the 5th district is the son-in-law of Governor Garcia.
Yes.
So, again, baka nahilo kayo sa connections ng mga politicians, allies, and family members and family by affinity dito sa Cebu. Pero I think you can read Ryan's text story para mas malinaw yung connection. So, yeah.
So that's Congressman Duprasco, and he's being challenged by another Durano for that seat. And of course, Ace Durano, the former tourism secretary and congressman who held that seat as well, challenging Governor Gwen Garcia, the current incumbent. So that's the biggest threat to the power they face.
Yeah.
The biggest threat. Sorry. And that district has about 360,000 votes. So about 600,000 votes or more combined is in places where the Garcia's one Cebu does not necessarily have a command because of how things played out this election.
Right. So yun yung mga inaabang natin. Also another reason why Dili mo ko fully Manileño, no? I actually grew up Bisaya, but I've been living in Manila. Parang one of the reasons why we flew in also to Cebu, because Cebu is very much in the political spotlight, specifically this week, fresh off the Holy Week break. So kung kahapon ito sa the Uniteam Festival Rally in SRP, on Thursday, we'll be covering Vice President Leni Robredo and her running mate Kiko Pangilinan naman. They'll be campaigning around the province. Iba't ibang stops naman sila. This is their second visit. It would be their second visit since the campaign period started, no? Pero sila, they're visiting 4 LGUs, the last being Mandawi and the first being Danao City. So we'll see what will happen there. Again, like Ryan mentioned, Danao is in the 5th district. Again, kung saan, kumbaga rivals ang Durano clan and the Garcias. So we'll see what will happen there in the context of the Robredo campaign. Is there anything else that stood out for you last night?
Yeah, I think another thing that stood out for me was the lack of talking about local issues.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they do that when they go to other provinces, but other candidates who come here, they really look ahead of time of what issues affect the provinces and address them, whether it's Isko Moreno or Manny Pacquiao or Leni Robredo. You hear them talk about the things that affect the local communities in a very specific way, not just in broad strokes. And surprisingly, the only candidate who really spoke about local issues was a senatorial candidate, Larry Gadon, who talked about the perennial water issues here in Cebu. We have a La Nina this year, so it's not as felt as much because it's been raining a lot.
Right.
And he talked about how Cebu gets most of its water from ground sources, and that the dams that supply the city are not enough, which is true. And it's something that the local governments here have been trying to address for decades now. Whether there's an El Nino or not, and climate change is a very hot issue wherever you are in the world. And he was the only one who really talked about it. And I was hoping to hear more about their disaster response plans. Cebu was badly hit by Typhoon Odette.
That's a very recent pa na siya. It's not like a distant history for Cebuanos, no?
Yes, and you can still see structural damage going around the city from Odette. There are still thousands of families who are waiting for ayuda or financial aid. So Cebu City is currently in the process of distributing that aid. So a big criticism of the local governments here is that the aid distribution has been too slow, and that in the countryside, that a lot of agricultural lands have been destroyed, and people are waiting for help to get their livelihoods restarted. And so it was a lot of broad strokes and talking about unity, but there I think are specific things that that I think people should have been.
We're waiting to hear,
To
To answer Ryan's question, normal yun for the Uniteam, for at least the standard bearers nila. They don't really deviate a lot from their prepared speeches. In fact, last night, may konting pause at variation. I think one of the few moments was na Sara Duterte paused her speech, tas nanguha siya og kanang mga portrait or whatever of the crowd. But there wasn't really any deviation, wala kanang Cebu specific na promises. Kasi nga, you expect that, no, nga, kumoto kasi if you go to a province or a city, you make specific promises kung sa may issue nila. Is it kuryente? Naaba sila ka ng rehabilitation nga gusto tutukan. So, in previous rallies of the Uniteam that I've covered, neither Bongbong Marcos or Sara Duterte have really deviated from their stump speeches. So, normally, it's the local allies who will mention that. And siguro, kunwari in Quezon City, where their ally is Mike Defensor, and gusto ko lang i-note na may nakita kami mga tao na Mike Defensor t-shirts sa rally kagabi. Tinanong namin isa sa kanila, parang, saan ka galing? Galing ka ba Manila? Galing daw siya Manila. Siguro nakirally din, nakibisita. Isa lang naman yung nakita namin. So anyway, in the example of Mike Defensor, no, parang siya yung nag-bring up ng local issues ng Quezon City residents, and he tied it to Bongbong Marcos. So, kunwari parang, alam ko yung issue nyo ganito, ganyan, kinausap ko na si Bongbong Marcos at parang pinangako niya, natututukan yan. So, ganun yung, kumbaga, pagtahi. So, depende na rin sa local allies nila yun, how they tie it together. But more or less, you really see them stick to their stump speeches. I was personally surprised. I was expecting a little for Sara Duterte to go off the cuff. If only because she isn't from Cebu, but clearly home court advantage mo to. Aside from the language, her popularity here is unparalleled by any of her rivals for the vice presidency at this point. Siyempre, ang laki ng panalo ni President Duterte here. The win margin was over 1 million votes. Tama ba? Over 1 million votes, right, in 2016. So, and that popularity has carried on over to the daughter. So, I was expecting, or I was hoping to see her, go off the cuff, basin na pa siya mga side stories or whatever about Cebu, or, although she did speak Bisaya, obviously, the whole time. Pero, more or less, no, she still stuck to her stump speech. So, nothing really different. But what was different to me was the grandness of the rally last night.
So, production value-wise,
I think it was, Marcos Jr. himself acknowledged this during the speech na parang ito na ating pinaka-grand na rally na na-witness nila sa Uniteam. And considering that's coming off them campaigning in Eastern Visayas, and latest specifically where he traces his roots through his mother, the former First Lady Imelda Marcos, and his cousin. So may connection pa pala si Majority Leader Romualdez is Bongbong Marcos' cousin. He represents a district in Leyte, and nag-host sila recently doon before the Holy Week. So, given na galing sila doon, yung rally ni Cebu, ako personally, I think it was one of their biggest and grandest so far. So, yun yung mga, that's one thing that stood out, just the grandness of, parang naramdaman mo how this rally was important, not just to the Uniteam, but especially to one Cebu. Like, you can tell na this was really a big deal for the politicians, for the incumbents in Cebu.
And one quote that really stood out to me from Sara Duterte last night, she said, kung basta mutingog ang Cebu, musunod ang nasod.
No, that was Garcia.
Yeah. Both of them.
She also said
I heard it repeated. Twice, yes, I heard. And it's very playing to Cebu's influence in the national elections. How I think it comes from in the presidential elections, whoever usually wins in Cebu wins as president. 2004, it was Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. In 2010, it was Ninoy, the late Benigno Aquino III or Pinoy. And in 2016, it was President Rodrigo Duterte. But and for them, this was already a signal that this was that Cebu has chosen the BBM Sara Uniteam. Personally, I'm not sure if I'm convinced that this is already,
Although that was the, kumbaga, rallying cry nila kagabi, daog na. So, panalo na. Nanalo na sila, ganun. So, I mean, that's not unusual to hear that in a campaign rally na, syempre, pupunta ka doon, syempre, i-declare mo na panalo na kayo, di ba? With all the support that you're getting. But, palpable yung energy din sa crowd na, I think also it's very different when the candidate on stage who's running for, in Sara Duterte's case, the second highest national post is also speaking your language. Iba ang effect. Nga murag, she's one of us. Marnay na siguro nga dating food for the crowd, no?
Yeah. But I think, Cebu, like we've been saying over and over, Cebu has 3.2 million voters. Yeah. So there's still a lot. How many more weeks do we have to go?
And then you mentioned yesterday, di ba, undecided. Yes. Maraming undecided. Yes. Or, di naman majority. Hindi naman sinasabi na majority ng tao dito. But a significant amount.
Of the voting population is undecided. So this rally could have been a deciding factor for those undecided, but there's still many more events to come. And and during the election cycle, things move quickly.
Correct.
So
correct. Although we are entering the home stretch.
Yes.
So kanang crucial na niya for all the candidates, right? Interesting for me also is the projection that it might have been the first and last nga rally sa Uniteam dito sa Cebu, which is unusual to me kasi you would normally hear a national candidate come here twice, thrice, at least in the official campaign period pa lang na siya ha. So, parang ganun ka-important ang Cebu, and normally you want to visit not just Cebu City, but you definitely want to literally touch, press flesh with people sa ubang nasod, sa ubang cities and municipalities Cebu. In the Uniteam's case, I don't, parang mukhang ito na yung final na rally nila. Although, yun nga, parang kahapon, we saw Cebuanos from the north to the south of the island, converge in Cebu City. So, parang, kung sa kuan ba, tinubag-tubag sa mga candidates po diay. So, on Thursday again, Aliani Robredo will be coming here. They're also expecting a huge crowd for her. Kay, one of her first biggest crowds was here, diba? Sa start sa campaign period. So, yun. Last na lang siguro to wrap this up. I think one of the things that went viral from last night nga statements was not from a politician, but ironically from Tony Gonzaga, the TV host and YouTube content creator who is one of the most prominent siguro na celebrity endorser of the Uniteam tandem, no? I'm not sure, I can't be sure that this is the first time she said it, but it was definitely the first time I heard it, and a lot of people heard it, no nga. Ang iyang pag-introduce kay Bongbong Marcos, dili lang na her usual spiel, diba, Tigre ng Norte or whatever, parang konting-konti na lang daw makakabalik na si BBM sa kanyang tahanan, ang Malacanang. So, to me, that stood out kasi parang it's a fact that the campaign hasn't been avoiding, but the campaign hasn't been emphasizing the fact na he is his father's son. Hindi naman sa kinahihiya ni Bongbong Marcos yung fact na yun, na anak siya ni Ferdinand Marcos yung namatay na diktador. Pero they don't make it prominent in the campaign material, or the supporters do, but the campaign itself hindi. And on stage, you don't really hear it, emphasize. Sumurag, it kind of stood out to me na in-emphasize yung fact na yun na he's gonna go back home because he grew up in Malacanang. He was a child when his father's term started, and then 21 years after, saka na sila umalis dahil sa People Power Revolution. And of course, that is the main theme of the campaign. Although the Marcos campaign would beg to differ, they don't want to make it the focus. Pero it's really the return of, or the efforts for Bongbong Marcos to return to Malacanang. Did we miss anything? Merdugi na ta nagyaw-yaw dire.
I think that was all from my end from last night.
Yeah. So yun. So that was our recap of the events in the contexts of last night's Uniteam rally in Cebu City. Again, we'll still be here. Makikita niyo ulit yung mukha namin on Thursday for the Robredo Pangilinan campaign naman in Mandaue City. This has been
Ryan Macasero
and Bea Cupin in Cebu City. Thank you for watching. Bye!